Welcome back to ETCS Bytes Back, and we have been looking at Chapter 5 and the Start of Mission Procedure, Section 5.4. And in Part 1, we got as far as the driver ID being entered, and in Level 2 or 3, the train connecting to the RBC and establishing the level and the validity of the position. So what happens next? Well, we're going to continue to work through the procedure, which is detailed in Chapter 5, and that lovely complicated flowchart. And where are we on the flowchart? Well, we are down at box S10, which is waiting for the driver selection. So we have done most of the area in the flowchart above that box. However, there is a part that we need to look at next. So what is possible from box S10? Well, in box S10, the driver will be presented with a main menu on the DMI, with options which may be active, shown as light grey, or inactive, as in dark grey. Depending on which ones are available in different conditions, the display may look slightly different. But the norm will be now for the driver to confirm the train data. So that is the prime exit from the box S10 is through E11, the driver selecting the train data entry. And what does that mean? Well, we will look at that in a bit more detail. But first, we need to just remember that there are other conditions that can apply in the flowchart which are not shown. So looking in the degraded section, we can find there is an override procedure which may or may not be available. And start may or may not be available, depending on the circumstances. And depending if the driver then selects start, what will happen. And we also need to be aware that the menu system is also shown in a series of flowcharts within the DMI specification. These can look quite complicated, but the main window in the center is what we are looking at. And for that main window, each of the buttons will have a set of conditions. So in order to work out what the driver may be able to do, we need to understand the status of many things within the onboard. However, we're going to try and keep things simple and just look at the normal flow of data entry that the driver will take. But before that, we also need to just remember that the driver has the option of selecting shunting. Now, shunting allows the train to be moved forwards and backwards, and it's unsupervised by ETCS. And the great advantage is that it doesn't need any train data. If you're undertaking a shunting activity, it may well be that the formation of the train changes. So that can be selected before the driver has entered the train data. Another situation where train data is irrelevant is when the train is going to operate in non-leading. This is where a traction unit is providing extra power to assist the train, but it's not in control, it's not the leading unit, and it's that leading unit that controls the brakes. So as I say, let's keep things simple. So we need to enter the train data, and immediately we hit another question. Is that train data going to be entered as fixed data or as flexible data? Well, some trains don't change multiple units, for example. They tend to be a fixed formation. They may be able to couple to other formations of the same type, but there will only be a limited range of trains that can be configured. And for that, fixed train data is the most appropriate. However, other trains do change their formation. And if they are truly random, like a freight train, then a flexible entry is appropriate. However, for other formations, it may be possible to use the fixed option as well. And sometimes both may be provided on a locomotive or traction unit, but with the driver able to select between the two. And these information is all configured in the ETCS onboard, what can be selected and when. So fixed train data, what does it have? Well, it is a preset description of a train configuration, for instance, a 4-car multiple unit. And there might be another option for 2 4-car multiple units coupled together to make 8 cars. Selecting one of these options and confirming it completes all of the train data entry that the driver needs to make. And in fact, the train data can only be entered from the presets when the train is in fixed train data mode. You can't enter some of the data from the presets and then go and edit it in a flexible manner. All the necessary train data is linked to that preset and configured into the onboard. Things like the length of the train, the braking capability, maximum speed, etc. We'll look at a bit of what the information can be in a later video. Flexible train data entry allows the driver to fully configure the supervision of the ETCS. It may be that some data is pre-configured and coded into the onboard. However, normally the driver will be required to enter and validate the remaining data. And that could include the train length and its braking capability, and it may also need to update the maximum speed. For instance, in a freight or cargo train, the length will vary depending on the number of wagons. The braking capability may vary depending on the types of wagons, and the maximum speed that the whole formation can operate may also vary depending on the mix of wagons in the formation. So for the flexible train data entry, the driver has 2 screens to complete. And the first is to enter a train category. Now the train category is describing a number of features of the type of train. And we'll just have a look at the different categories available. We've got passenger trains, we've got tilting trains, which are passenger trains, we've got freight trains where the brake setting is in the passenger setting. This means that the brakes apply quickly in the event of needing to be applied, and freight trains with the brake position in the G or goods position. In this position, the brakes take longer to be applied. It avoids the train buffers and couplings crashing together so much. Within each of the basic types of trains, there are a number of other settings, known as the labels, and each of those has associated with it a maximum cant efficiency that the train can operate at, and the type of brakes that are being used within that formation. So you can see for a Pass 1 that the train can operate with an 80mm cant efficiency, and that the brakes are set to the P setting, and it's a passenger train. Having selected the train category, the driver will generally be asked to enter the length in meters and confirm it, the brake percentage, which as you can see can be greater than 100, and the maximum speed of the train. The second screen allows for the axle load category to be entered or confirmed, and other information which often will be pre-configured, such as whether the train is airtight or not, or the gauge of the train for the loading gauge. Axle load categories are subject of another topic. All of this information entered either from the presets or by the driver entering the flexible data entry goes into the brake model. And depending on how it is entered depends on exactly what information is derived and how it is derived. If we have a preset brake model, we go from the braking model top left straight to the traction and braking models in the purple middle area. If, however, we're using the flexible entry, then the brake percentage combined with the brake position goes through what's called the conversion model to generate a traction braking model equivalent to if it had been entered from preset. And this is then used to control the supervision by the ETCS. So having entered and validated the train data, what next? Well, the system checks to see whether a train running number is entered and valid. If it is, then the driver is not required to do anything. However, if it isn't valid, the driver is requested to enter and validate the train running number. Depending now on the level, depends on the next step. If the level is 0, 1, or NTC, it goes straight to the main screen, ready for the driver to press start. If, however, it is level 2 or 3, the train data needs to be reported to the RBC, and if a session is open, then that takes place before going to the main menu. Otherwise, the flow takes us back to S10, and the driver would need to go into the radio menu in order to establish a radio connection, or possibly go into shunt or staff responsible. The train running number is generally entered as a 8-digit code. However, in the UK, there is an exemption to use an alphanumeric code, and so the driver can select to enter the alphanumeric train running number using the classic UK format of number, letter, number, number. And in order to make the train running number unique, it is then appended by the location of the train, typically the part of the number of the signal or line side marker that the train is standing at. So are we ready to start? Well, the conditions listed in the DMI specification for the start button are the train is at standstill, which is, mode is standby, well it will be because we're in the start emission process, driver ID is valid, that was done right at the beginning, train data is valid, we've just talked about that, the RTMS and ETCS level is valid, it will be, and the train running number is valid, and we've just entered the train running number. So what happens next? Well, so it depends now on the level. In some of the levels, the reaction is automatic and controlled by the onboard. So working from left to right, if the train is in level 1 and the driver presses start or select start, then SR mode, staff responsible, is automatically offered to the driver and they have to acknowledge it. If, however, they were level NTC, the reaction is SN, the system national mode is offered, and again, the driver has to acknowledge it. And lastly, in level 0, pressing start results in unfitted UN being offered to the driver for acceptance. And that's detailed in the procedures in S22, 23, and 24, where you can see that the text is almost identical in all of them. And the result is that the driver will get an icon shown in yellow with a flashing yellow border, and they will need to acknowledge that they want to go into staff responsible, system national, or unfitted. So in levels 2 and 3, it is up to the trackside to decide whether to send a movement authority to authorize SR or to not respond at all and wait until circumstances change. The specifications are not explicit on how the trackside should respond. It is up to each country to develop its own rules, technical and operational, and applications. So start emission procedure starts with the driver activating a cab, and it can end if the driver deactivates or closes that cab. However, normally having activated the cab, the driver will go through the menus we've been looking at, and the end of start emission process will be when the onboard enters a mode other than SB, normally with a movement authority.